The crystal towers of Lumaria pierced the sky like glittering teeth, catching sunlight and scattering it across the city in rainbow patterns. Up in the tallest spire, Princess Niara stood alone, her lavender skin reflecting the sunset. Her violet eyes, usually good at hiding feelings, couldn't mask the pain she carried. Niara's problem was simple but devastating. She couldn't have kids. For the royal family of Lumaria, this wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a political disaster. Without a child to inherit the throne, the psychic network binding their civilization would collapse. It was like their society ran on special royal Wi-Fi, and Niara was supposed to be the next router. The fruitless blossom, courtiers whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Each nickname stung, but Niara had mastered the art of the royal poker face. Potential partners came and went, each disappearing faster than free food at a palace reception once they learned her secret. Emperor Thaxon, her father, had tried everything. Expensive doctors, sketchy experimental treatments, even ancient rituals that looked suspiciously like interpretive dance. Nothing worked. Niara remained childless, and the emperor's patience was wearing thinner than the excuses of his geneticists. For generations, the royal line had been more than just figureheads. Their unique genetic makeup stabilized the planetary consciousness web that connected all Lumarians. This telepathic network enabled their civilization's technological advances, from crystalline architecture that responded to thought to starships guided by mind-melded navigators. Without an heir of pure bloodline, the network would degrade within a generation, potentially collapsing their entire way of life. Niara had spent years pretending this reality didn't crush her spirit daily. She filled her time with diplomatic studies and cultural preservation, becoming an expert in interspecies relations, a skill that seemed particularly ironic given her defect. The royal physicians had named her condition genetic incompatibility syndrome, a fancy term for your reproductive system refuses to activate because your DNA is too specialized. They treated her with clinical detachment, as though she were a disappointing experiment rather than a person. During a routine diplomatic meeting, Emperor Thaxon's voice cut through the chamber like a chainsaw through butter. The Earthlings want to be friends. They've sent their top diplomat. Niara stood quietly in the corner, wondering why she'd been summoned. The answer came with her father's next words. His name is Reed Valencia, the Emperor continued, his silver eyes suddenly locking onto Niara like targeting systems. He arrives tomorrow. You'll be his companion. The room went so quiet you could hear a royal pin drop. Father, Niara said, keeping her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. I'm a princess, not a party favor. You're my biggest disappointment, he replied with the casual cruelty of someone commenting on bad weather. Now you can finally be useful. The human will be flattered by royal attention and might agree to worse trade terms. Niara wanted to scream, to overturn the ancient negotiation table with its inlaid star maps, to remind her father that she was more than a failed incubator for the next generation. Instead, she bowed her head slightly, the minimum gesture of deference required by protocol. Her compliance was not submission but survival. Royal law gave Thaxon absolute authority over his children, and those who defied him often disappeared into the crystalline vaults beneath the palace. The imperial transport ship carrying Niara to the docking station the next day was beautiful, efficient, and completely unsympathetic to her predicament. She wore her ceremonial robes that changed colors like a mood ring on steroids. But inside, she felt like a prisoner being shipped off. The human vessel looked like someone had designed a spaceship based on a toolbox, all angles, bolts, and practical features without a single aesthetic consideration. It was the cargo pants of spaceships. Reed Valencia was nothing like the brash, loud human she'd expected. His skin was the warm brown of Lumarian cocoa beans, his eyes green as the sacred forests. When he bowed slightly, it seemed genuine rather than the "I'm doing this because protocol says I have to" bow she was used to. Princess Niara, he said, his voice surprisingly pleasant. I'm honored, though I definitely didn't request a royal babysitter for this trip. The honor is Lumaria's, Niara replied automatically, then added, just so we're clear, this wasn't my idea either. Forced diplomatic friendship? That's a new one. Well, at least we're both honest about it. As they boarded the ship, their hands briefly touched during the formal greeting. Niara felt an unexpected warmth travel up her arm. Not unpleasant, just strange. She dismissed it as a static discharge from the different atmospheric processors between their worlds. Reed seemed not to notice, busy directing his crew to prepare for departure. The human ship's interior assaulted Nyara's senses. All sharp corners and exposed machinery where Lumarian design favored curves and hidden technology. The constant beeping and humming of equipment made her feel like she was trapped inside a hyperactive robot. Her assigned quarters were functional but alien. The bed too firm, the lighting too harsh, the temperature fluctuating between uncomfortably warm and slightly chilly. The walls were covered in what humans called art, but seemed to Nyara like random splashes of color without psychic resonance. She spent the first night curled in a ball, her royal training the only thing preventing her from demanding immediate return to Lumaria. Reed respected her space but remained unfailingly kind. He adjusted the environmental controls to Lumarian standards and even tried to program the food synthesizers to create her native cuisine, resulting in one memorable dinner that looked like Lumarian royal stew but tasted suspiciously like Earth peanut butter. "Sorry about that," Reed said, watching her polite but failed attempt to swallow the concoction. "The molecular structure of your spices doesn't translate well in our system. Tomorrow I'll just stick to universal nutrient blocks." "Don't bother," Niara replied, surprising herself with a small smile. "I'd rather risk interesting failures than guaranteed boredom." Reed's eyebrows rose slightly at this unexpected glimpse of personality behind her royal facade. "I'll take that as permission to continue my culinary crimes against your culture." "You're not what I expected," Niara admitted after a week of minimal interaction. They sat in the observation deck, watching cosmic rivers flow past the windows. "Let me guess," Reed said with a slight smile. "You expected a loud, obnoxious human who'd treat you like a souvenir? Maybe take selfies with the purple space princess to impress people back home?" "Something like that," she admitted. "I've spent my career learning that the universe is too vast for that kind of thinking," he replied. "Besides, I'm terrible at selfies, always cut off half my head." Something in his easy humor broke through Niara's carefully constructed wall. "You speak like someone who understands being different." Reed nodded, his expression softening. "My younger brother was born with a genetic condition that affected his neural development. On Earth centuries ago, he would have been hidden away or worse. He couldn't communicate like others, but he made art that said more than words ever could." "What happened to him?" Niara asked, genuinely curious. "He died 5 years ago, but in his 27 years, he taught me more about perception and strength than all my fancy diplomatic training." Reed smiled gently. "He showed me that what looks broken to some people often contains its own kind of wholeness." For the first time, Nyara considered her broken reproductive system not as a flaw, but as a different kind of potential. The thought was so foreign, so contrary to everything she'd been taught about her royal purpose, that she turned away quickly, unwilling to let this stranger see the conflicting emotions playing across her face. Reed sensed her discomfort and changed the subject, pointing out a particularly spectacular stellar formation visible through the viewport. The Cascade Nebula. Humans named it after waterfalls because of how the light seems to flow through the gas clouds. "We call it the ancestor's breath," Niara replied, grateful for the distraction. "Legend says it was formed when the first Lumarian psychics exhaled their final thoughts into the cosmos." "I like that better than our name," Reed admitted. "Humans have an unfortunate tendency to name things based on what they look like rather than what they mean." Later that night, lying in her quarters, Niara thought about their conversation. For years, she'd defined herself by what she lacked: the ability to continue the royal line. Reed's perspective suggested another way of seeing herself, one she'd never allowed. During the next few days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm of companionship. Reed taught her Earth card games, which Niara mastered with suspicious speed. "Are you sure you're not using psychic abilities to read my cards?" "I would never, but your face gives everything away." She introduced him to Lumarian meditation techniques that left him snoring softly after 3 minutes. They shared stories about their worlds, carefully avoiding the topic of why she had been assigned to accompany him. As she drifted into uneasy sleep after one such evening, strange sensations rippled through her body. A warm glow emanated from her core, spreading outward through her limbs. Niara woke with a gasp, her skin emitting a faint luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with her racing heart. She stumbled to the medical bay, activating the diagnostic systems with shaking hands. The scanner hummed as it analyzed her biology, results appearing on the holographic display. Niara stared in disbelief, running the diagnostic 3 times to be sure. According to the readings, she was pregnant, something that had been medically certified impossible. "This can't be happening," she whispered, staring at the unmistakable evidence on the screen. On Lumaria, Emperor Thaxon was enjoying his nightly ritual of intimidating his advisors when a priority message arrived from the surveillance systems embedded in the human ship. The decoded medical scan appeared on his private terminal with a simple note: "Princess Nyara, pregnancy confirmed." The Emperor's face went from its normal silver lavender to ghostly white, then to furious purple, faster than a Lamarian traffic light. The crystal goblet he held shattered in his grip, sending expensive royal wine splashing across ancient manuscripts. "Impossible!" he roared, blood mixing with the spilled liquid. "This violates every law of biology and royal protocol." His chief geneticist, summoned from what had clearly been a sound sleep judging by his mismatched ceremonial robes, trembled before the imperial fury. "Sire, conception between Lumarian and human biology should be physically impossible," the scientist stuttered. "It's like trying to download software meant for a quantum computer onto a toaster." "Yet here is evidence to the contrary," Thaxon snarled, pointing at the medical data. "And not just any Lamarian, but my daughter, carrier of the purest royal bloodline." The implications were catastrophic. For generations, the royal house had maintained genetic isolation, believing their psychic abilities required untainted bloodlines. A hybrid child threatened everything: their traditions, their power, possibly their entire civilization's Wi-Fi password. "Could it be some sort of medical anomaly?" asked the geneticist, desperately searching for a rational explanation. "Perhaps the princess has developed a benign growth that's triggering false readings." "Our surveillance systems are infallible," Thaxon replied, his voice dangerously quiet now. "My daughter carries an abomination, a hybrid that must not be allowed to develop. Prepare the Void Hunters. The human must be eliminated, and Nyara recovered." The geneticist swallowed hard. The Void Hunters were the Emperor's most terrifying enforcers, beings that had sacrificed their Lamarian consciousness for perfect loyalty and deadly efficiency. They were rarely deployed and never without significant casualties. "Perhaps, Majesty, we should study this development before taking drastic action," he suggested timidly. "If human and Lamarian genetics have somehow become compatible, the scientific implications could be—" "Are you questioning my decision?" Thaxon's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "No, sire. I merely suggest that from a research perspective—" "The only research that will be conducted," the Emperor interrupted, "is an autopsy on whatever remains of the human after the Void Hunters complete their mission." Aboard the human vessel, Reed stood outside the medical bay, concern etched across his features. The ship's systems had alerted him to emergency medical activity, but the door remained sealed from within. "Princess, are you okay in there?" he called, knocking gently. "If you're sick from that attempt I made at Lamarian fruit salad yesterday, I swear I followed the recipe." The door slid open suddenly, revealing Nyara standing in the center of the medical bay. Her normally composed features were transformed by shock, her skin emitting pulses of light that fluctuated with her breathing. "What's happening?" Reed asked, stepping forward cautiously. Nyara's violet eyes locked onto his, wide with disbelief. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words sounding strange even to her. "Something that should be biologically impossible." Reed froze, processing her statement. "You mean—" "Yes," she interrupted. "I'm carrying a child that cannot exist according to every medical authority on my world." "I don't understand," Reed said carefully. "We haven't even held hands, let alone, you know." "This is an accusation," Nyara clarified. "Something has changed within me since I came aboard this ship. Something activated what was dormant." Reed's diplomatic training kicked in, pushing past his personal shock to focus on the practical implications. "Your father's surveillance systems, they monitor your medical data, don't they?" When Nyara nodded, he continued grimly, "Then we need to assume he already knows. He'll see this as contamination." Nayara said, her voice hollow. The ultimate betrayal of my royal duty. What do you want to do? Reed asked simply. The question startled her. No one had asked what she wanted in, well, possibly ever. Nayara had been a royal asset, a potential breeder of the next psychic controller, a diplomatic token, but never someone whose desires mattered. She began, then stopped, placing a protective hand over her abdomen. I want to understand how this happened, and I want to protect this child. It shouldn't be punished for simply existing. Reed nodded. Then we'll figure this out together. First, we need to change course and find somewhere safe. Later, while Reed consulted with the ship's biological database, Nayara conducted her own investigation. She accessed Lumarian historical archives using her royal credentials, searching for any precedent. After hours of research, she found a reference to an archaeological expedition to the abandoned moon Eridea. Among the findings was a crystalline relic called the Genesis Shard, rumored to contain cellular memory from the species' evolutionary past. The records indicated that Reed Valencia had visited Eridea 3 months earlier as part of a cultural exchange program. He had been present when researchers activated one of the shards, which had responded with unexplained light before going dormant again. Lumarian legends spoke of similar crystals, capable of awakening slumbering potential. What if the Genesis Shard had somehow altered Reed at a cellular level? What if their brief physical contact, a formal handshake upon her arrival, had triggered some long-forgotten biological pathway? While Nayara pieced together this theory, Reed sat in the ship's garden module, surrounded by plants from dozens of worlds. The artificial night cycle had dimmed the lighting, but glowing space ferns provided enough illumination to see. I'm not here to blame you, Nayara said, approaching quietly. I think I've found an explanation. She explained her theory about the Genesis Shard. Reed listened carefully, his scientific mind analyzing the plausibility, while another part of him grappled with becoming an accidental father through what amounted to mystical handshake conception. If you're right, he said slowly, then this child represents something unprecedented, a connection between our species that was lost or deliberately severed in ancient times. My father will see it differently, Nayara replied grimly. He'll view this child as contamination, a threat to everything he believes about genetic purity, like putting pineapple on a pizza, but worse. Reed's expression grew serious. Will he try to harm you? Not me, she answered, her hand moving unconsciously to her abdomen. But this child, without question, in his eyes it represents the end of everything he values. As if summoned by her words, the ship's alert system activated. A transmission had been intercepted, encoded in Imperial cipher, but partially decrypted by the ship's AI. The message was brief. Void hunters deployed. Target, human vessel. Primary objective, terminate hybrid embryo. Secondary, eliminate human contamination. Return princess for purification. That doesn't sound good, Reed said, displaying a talent for understatement. We need to change course, immediately. The Void Hunters are Lumarian elite assassins, specially modified for space operations. They're like ninja commandos, but with fewer moral qualms and better dental plans. Where can we go? Nayara asked. My father's influence extends throughout the Lumarian Confederation. There's nowhere in charted space. Not nowhere, Reed interrupted, inputting coordinates. There's someone who might help us. An exiled Lumarian scientist named Lyria Vox. She's been living on Sanctuary Moon for decades, conducting independent research on evolutionary biology. If anyone might understand what's happening to you, it's her. Nayara recognized the name immediately. Lyria Vox had been a legendary geneticist in the Imperial Court when Nayara was a child. Brilliant, outspoken, and eventually declared a heretic for suggesting that Lumarian isolation policies were counter-evolutionary. Her exile had been a polite alternative to execution, arranged by sympathizers within the scientific community. How do you know about Lyria? Nayara asked, surprised. Reed gave her a wry smile. Diplomats make it their business to know about brilliant people who've fallen out of favor with authoritarian regimes. They tend to be excellent sources of unfiltered information. The ship lurched as it changed course, dropping out of established hyperspace lanes and diving into less traveled sectors. Niara steadied herself against a wall, her mind reeling. 20 days ago, she had been a princess resigned to her genetic fate. Now she was a fugitive carrying an impossible child, fleeing alongside a human diplomat she barely knew. What terrified her most was the realization that she was not afraid for herself, but for the life growing within her. A life that, against all logic, she had already begun to cherish. As the ship accelerated towards Sanctuary Moon, deep within her womb, cellular changes continued at an accelerated rate. The embryo developing inside Niara was not merely growing, it was evolving, reshaping its genetic structure in ways never before documented. And as it changed, pulses of energy began to flow between mother and child, creating a connection that would soon manifest in ways neither Niara nor Reed could anticipate. The Void Hunters, meanwhile, had locked onto their quantum signature. 6 biomechanical warriors, their bodies enhanced with void adaptation technology and neural implants that suppressed all emotion, moved through the darkness of space. Their vessels resembled predatory creatures, sleek, black, and virtually undetectable by conventional sensors. These guys really need to work on their personal branding, Reed muttered as they detected the pursuit. Nothing says we're the bad guys quite like calling yourself Void Hunters and flying around in ships that look like space sharks. Their appearance is deliberately intimidating, Niara explained, studying the sensor readings with growing concern. They're designed to invoke primal fear responses. Most targets are psychologically defeated before the hunters even engage. Well, I missed that memo, Reed replied, adjusting the ship's shields. I just think they're compensating for something. The leader, Commander Vex, received updated orders directly from Emperor Thaxon. The abomination grows stronger. Time is against us. Use any means necessary. Vex acknowledged the command with a simple neural pulse. Emotion had been purged from his consciousness during the conversion process, leaving only purpose and efficiency. He had once been a distinguished Lumarian general, before volunteering for transformation into something beyond ordinary limitations. Now he existed only to execute the Emperor's will, the perfect predator for this unprecedented threat. Sanctuary Moon appeared on the view screen as a small, verdant world orbiting a gas giant. Unlike most settled planets, it showed little sign of technological development. No orbital platforms, no artificial lights visible on the night side. It's deliberately kept this way, Reed explained as they began descent. Lyria believes in minimal intervention in natural environments. Her research facility is built into the landscape, powered by geothermal energy and virtually undetectable from orbit. Think eco-friendly space hermit, but with advanced degrees. They landed in a clearing, surrounded by towering trees with spiral-patterned bark. The air smelled of unfamiliar blossoms and mineral-rich soil. Niara stepped from the ship cautiously, her body weaker now as the pregnancy accelerated her metabolism. The local gravity was lighter than Lumaria's, making movement easier despite her increasing fatigue. Strange birds with translucent wings circled overhead, their calls musical and complex. The forest floor was carpeted with moss that seemed to glow faintly wherever they stepped, as if responding to their presence. Reed supported her as they walked along a barely visible path that wound through the forest. After nearly an hour of slow progress, they reached what appeared to be a living structure, a dwelling formed from guided botanical growth, trees and vines interwoven to create walls, ceilings, and archways. And I thought my apartment's living wall was impressive, Reed whispered. A figure emerged from the entrance, tall and willowy with the characteristic lavender skin of Lumarians, but weathered by age. Her eyes were not the typical violet, but an unusual amber color. I wondered when someone would come, the woman said, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic quality of Lumarian speech, but roughened by years away from her kind. The stars have been restless lately. Her gaze fell on Niara, narrowing with sudden intensity. Ah, now I understand why. Are you Lyria Vox? Reed asked. Once, yes. Now I'm simply Lyria of the forest. She gestured for them to enter. Come, the princess needs rest, and you both need answers. Also, I made tea, and it's awkward drinking alone. Inside the dwelling was a remarkable fusion of nature and technology. Biological specimens floated in transparent containment fields, while holographic data streams projected onto living surfaces. Your father's spies never found me, Lyria remarked to Niara, as she guided them through chambers where walls pulsed with bioluminescence and floors seemed to adjust their firmness to each footstep. They were always looking for power signatures, energy emissions, technology. They never understood that the most advanced science can appear indistinguishable from nature when properly integrated. Lyria guided Niara to a reclining surface that adjusted to her body's contours. "May I?" she asked, hands hovering above Niara's abdomen. Niara nodded, and Lyria placed her palms gently on the princess's body. The exiled scientist closed her eyes, her breathing slowing as she entered a light trance state. After several minutes, she withdrew her hands, her amber eyes wide with wonder. "The child is unique," she said softly. "Not merely a hybrid of human and Lumarian genetics, but something more complex. The DNA is reconfiguring itself, accessing ancestral codes from both lineages." "Is that possible?" Reed asked. "Theoretically, no." Lyria moved to a console formed from interwoven vines and activated a holographic display. "But the evidence is undeniable. This embryo contains genetic sequences I've only seen in pre-severance archaeological samples, from before our species diverged from common ancestors." "Are you saying humans and Lumarians are related?" Niara asked, struggling to process this information. "Related?" Lyria laughed. "My dear, we were the same species until about 15,000 years ago, when some ambitious geneticists decided to play let's make two species out of one. The Lumarian ascendancy has suppressed this knowledge for millennia, maintaining the myth of our separate evolution." "That's a lot to take in," Reed said, looking slightly dazed. "The child you carry appears to be activating dormant genetic memory, reconnecting what was artificially divided," Lyria continued, manipulating the holographic display to show complex genetic structures. "It's extraordinary, but also dangerous. The embryo is generating unusual energy signatures as it develops." "Will it harm Niara?" Reed asked, concern evident in his voice. "No," Lyria said, "but it requires stabilization. The child must be born in a place of balance, a nexus point where the planet's natural energies converge. There is such a place here, the Heart Grove, but we must hurry. I sense you were followed." As if confirming her words, a distant alarm sounded from their ship. Reed checked a portable scanner. "Void hunters," he confirmed grimly. "They found us sooner than I expected. These guys are more persistent than subscription service salespeople." "Then we move now," Lyria decided. "I'll guide you to the Heart Grove. It's a half-day's journey deeper into the forest." They departed immediately, leaving most of their supplies behind. Lyria led them along hidden paths that seemed to shift and change behind them, as if the forest itself was concealing their trail. As they traveled, Lyria explained more about the ancient history their societies had forgotten. "The severance was a response to a crisis," she told them. "Our common ancestors faced extinction from a neural degradation disease. The solution was to create two distinct genetic paths, one emphasizing psychic development, the other focusing on physical adaptability." "Lumarians and humans," Reed surmised. "Yes, but the division was never meant to be permanent. The original geneticists intended reunification once both evolutionary branches had stabilized. Instead, the Lumarian leadership chose isolation, believing their path superior. They engineered the forgetting, rewriting history and biology to prevent reconnection." "Is that why I couldn't conceive before?" Niara asked. "Was I designed to be barren?" Lyria's expression softened with compassion. "Not exactly. The royal bloodline carries additional genetic modifications, fail-safes to prevent unauthorized combinations. Your reproductive system was dormant, not defective. It required a specific trigger to activate." "The Genesis shard," Reed said, "when I was exposed to it on Eridia." "Precisely," Lyria confirmed. "The ancient artifacts contain cellular memory from before the severance. Your contact with the shard altered your biochemistry subtly, making you a carrier for the activation sequence. When you and Niara exchanged genetic material, even through minimal contact like a handshake, it triggered what had been suppressed." Their conversation halted abruptly as Lyria raised her hand in warning. Ahead, the forest darkened unnaturally, shadows deepening despite the afternoon sunlight. "Void essence," Lyria whispered. "They're closer than I thought, using shadow walking techniques." Reed drew a compact energy weapon from his belt. Can we reach the Heart Grove before they intercept us? We must try, Lyria replied, changing direction slightly. This way, there's an underground passage through the root systems that might conceal our energy signatures. They descended into a network of massive tree roots that formed natural tunnels beneath the forest floor. Bioluminescent fungi provided dim illumination, casting everything in an eerie blue glow. Just like the nightclubs back on Earth, Reed quipped, trying to lighten the mood, though with fewer terrible dance moves. Niara's condition deteriorated as they moved through the tunnels. The child within her was growing more active, pulses of energy emanating from her abdomen with increasing frequency. Each wave left her weaker, her lavender skin paling to a dangerous silver white. Something's wrong, she gasped, collapsing against a root wall. The child, it's trying to communicate. Lyria knelt beside her, placing one hand on Niara's forehead and the other on her abdomen. Her amber eyes widened. The embryo is developing consciousness far too rapidly. It's responding to the danger, trying to protect itself and you. How is that possible? Reed asked, keeping watch on the tunnel behind them. This is no ordinary child, Lyria answered. It carries genetic memory from both your species, including dormant abilities from before the severance. We must reach the Heart Grove immediately, or both mother and child will be lost. Reed made a swift decision. He lifted Niara into his arms, surprising her with his strength. Lead the way, he told Lyria. I'll carry her. My hero, Niara murmured, a faint smile on her lips despite her pain. Though I should warn you, royal princesses traditionally weigh more than they look due to all the ceremonial responsibilities we carry. Funny, Reed grunted, adjusting his grip. I was just thinking you seemed lighter than expected due to the total lack of ego most royals cart around. They emerged from the root tunnels as twilight descended on the forest. The 3 moons of sanctuary had risen, their combined light creating patterns through the canopy above. Ahead, a circular clearing appeared, surrounded by ancient trees whose trunks seemed to glow with internal light. Crystal formations jutted from the ground at regular intervals, forming a perfect geometric pattern. The Heart Grove, Lyria announced, a natural nexus of planetary energy, and our only hope. As they stepped into the clearing, a sensation of profound peace descended upon them. The air felt charged yet balanced, as if opposing forces had achieved perfect harmony. Niara felt the child within her respond immediately, the chaotic energy pulses stabilizing into a steady rhythm. Reed gently lowered her to the center of the grove, where a bed of soft moss covered the ground. The crystal formations began to glow more intensely, resonating with the energy emanating from Niara's body. But their moment of sanctuary was short-lived. At the edge of the clearing, darkness congealed into 6 humanoid shapes, the Void Hunters, their biomechanical bodies absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their faces were featureless except for glowing white sensory organs where eyes should be. Behind them emerged a 7th figure, larger and more terrifying. The Death Arbiter, a semi-sentient construct activated only in times of extreme imperial crisis. Its body was formed from shadows given physical form, crowned with energy patterns that mimicked the imperial regalia. The child must not be born, it spoke, its voice a distortion of the emperor's own. The bloodline must remain pure. You know, Reed said, positioning himself between the threats and Niara, most grandparents just settle for complaining about baby names. The human speaks in nonsense, the Death Arbiter responded, raising a hand wreathed in destructive energy. He will be eliminated first. The attack came with devastating speed. A blast of void energy struck Reed squarely in the chest, sending him flying backward. He crashed against one of the crystal formations, blood spilling from his mouth as he struggled to rise again. No, Niara cried, attempting to move toward him despite her weakened state. But something extraordinary happened. As her distress peaked, the child within her responded. A wave of golden light erupted from Niara's body, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. Where it touched the Void Hunters, they froze in place, their shadow-based technology disrupted by the ancient energy. The Death Arbiter faltered, its form flickering as the golden light interfered with the psychic connection to Emperor Thaxon. It raised both arms, gathering void energy for a final, devastating attack aimed directly at Niara's womb. Reed, despite his injuries, launched himself forward with the last of his strength, intercepting the Death Arbiter's blast. The void energy engulfed him, his body contorting in agony as it absorbed the full force of the attack meant for the child. Nyara screamed, not in pain, but in fury. Something primal awakened within her. Not just the maternal instinct to protect her child, but a deeper connection to forces long suppressed in Lumarian biology. Her eyes blazed with golden fire, her skin emanating light so intense it appeared solid. She rose from the ground, floating several feet above the Heart Grove's center. The crystal formations responded, their glow intensifying until they became pillars of pure energy. The forest itself seemed to awaken, roots erupting from the ground to entangle the Void Hunters, branches bending inward to form a protective dome around Nyara, Reed, and Lyria. At the center of Nyara's chest, a symbol appeared, two interlocking spirals, one representing Lumarian DNA, the other human, the ancient sign of connection before the severance. A voice spoke, not from Nyara's mouth, but from the very air around them. We are the reconciliation. We are what was divided made whole again. The artificial boundaries end with us. The Death Arbiter lunged forward in one final attempt to complete its mission, but the combined energy of the Heart Grove and Nyara's transformation was too powerful. The construct's shadow form began to unravel, its connection to Emperor Thaxan severed by forces it could not comprehend. With a sound like distant thunder, it collapsed into nothingness. The Void Hunters, their neural links to the Imperial Command disrupted, fell into dormant states, their biomechanical bodies shutting down without the constant control signal from Lumaria. Slowly, gently, Nyara descended back to the forest floor. The overwhelming light diminished, though her skin continued to emit a soft glow. The symbol on her chest faded gradually as she knelt beside Reed's crumpled form. "Reed," she whispered, using his given name for the first time. "Please don't leave me." His eyes fluttered open, though his breathing was labored. "I'm still here," he managed, attempting a smile despite his pain. "That was quite a light show. Do you do this at all your parties, or am I special?" "The child protected you both," Lyria said in wonder, approaching cautiously. "It accessed genetic memory from before the severance, the abilities our ancestors possessed that were deliberately suppressed." Nyara placed Reed's hand gently on her abdomen. "The child is still here, still growing, but something has changed. I can feel its consciousness now, like a distant song." "The Heart Grove has stabilized the pregnancy," Lyria explained. "The accelerated development has normalized, though this child will never be ordinary. It carries the potential to heal the ancient division between our peoples." Reed struggled to sit up, his injuries partially healed by the Grove's energy, but still severe. "Your father won't stop," he warned. "Once he realizes the Death Arbiter failed." "He'll send worse," Nyara agreed, "but we've been given time. The child showed me visions while you fought, glimpses of what might be. Not just an heir to a throne, but a bridge between worlds." On Lumaria, Emperor Thaxan sat alone in his private meditation chamber, his consciousness still reeling from the psychic backlash of the Death Arbiter's destruction. For the first time in his long reign, fear had taken root in his heart. The Imperial Hearthstone, a massive crystal embedded in the throne room wall that had glowed blue for thousands of years, signifying the purity of the royal bloodline, had changed color. It now pulsed with a golden light that matched the energy signature his instruments had detected from Sanctuary Moon. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice breaking. "The bloodline cannot be rewritten." But the ancient stone, older than the Empire itself, older perhaps than the Severance, told a different story. Its changing color heralded something unprecedented. A new heir had been recognized, not by imperial decree, but by forces that predated the Empire itself. The Emperor's chief geneticist entered cautiously, bowing so low he nearly bumped his nose on his own knees. "Sire, we've analyzed the energy signature from Sanctuary Moon. It matches patterns found in pre-severance artifacts, specifically those associated with the original synthesis." Thaxan's head snapped up. "That knowledge was purged from all records millennia ago. How do you know of it?" The geneticist hesitated, then answered truthfully. "There have always been those who preserved the old knowledge, sire. Some of us believe the severance was never meant to be permanent. Like a cosmic family therapy session waiting to happen, the geneticist didn't add, valuing his continued existence. Thaxton rose from his meditation platform, rage and fear warring in his expression. Assemble the Imperial fleet. I will not allow my lineage to end with this aberration. With respect, Majesty, the geneticist said carefully, the Hearthstone has acknowledged the child. According to the most ancient laws, this means, I know what it means, Thaxton snarled. It means war. Across the galaxy, word began to spread. At first, just whispers among the star-faring species. The barren princess carries life. The divided bloodlines reunite. A child of two worlds grows. Some received this news with hope, others with fear. The equilibrium maintained for 15,000 years, the careful separation of human and Lumarian development, was about to end. Change was coming, whether the galaxy was ready or not. On Sanctuary Moon in the heart of the living forest, Nyara rested beneath the protective canopy of the Heart Grove. Reed sat beside her, his injuries slowly healing in the grove's regenerative atmosphere. Lyria worked tirelessly, monitoring the pregnancy and studying the unprecedented genetic recombination occurring within Nyara's womb. What did you mean, Reed asked quietly, when you said the child showed you visions? Nyara placed her hand over his. I saw many possible futures. In some, there was war, terrible conflict as my father's forces clashed with those who would protect us. In others, there was reconciliation, a new understanding between our peoples, a healing of the ancient division. And which future will come to pass? That depends on us, she replied. The child is a catalyst, but we determine the reaction. For the first time since learning of her pregnancy, Nyara smiled without reservation, a genuine expression of hope rather than diplomatic courtesy. The irony doesn't escape me. I was discarded by my father for being barren, yet now I carry the most significant life in generations. Reed returned her smile. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all. The next morning, Reed took Lyria aside while Nyara slept. The Emperor won't give up, he said quietly. He'll send more than assassins next time. I know, Lyria replied, her amber eyes reflecting concern. The royal forces are likely already mobilizing. Thaxton's pride won't allow him to accept this change. Then we need allies, Reed decided. Nyara may be estranged from the court, but surely there are others in Lumarian society who would support her and the child. Lyria considered this. There are those who have preserved the old knowledge, who believe the severance was a mistake. They operate in secret, but their network spans both human and Lumarian worlds. Can you contact them? Yes, Lyria said, but it will take time, and Thaxton will move quickly once he recovers from the psychic backlash of losing the Death Arbiter. Reed glanced back at Nyara's sleeping form. Then we better work faster than he does. Over the following days, as Nyara regained her strength and the child continued to develop at a now normal rate, Reed and Lyria sent encoded messages to potential allies throughout the galaxy. Using fragments of pre-severance communication techniques that bypassed Imperial monitoring systems, they reached out to scientists, historians, and progressives who had long questioned the enforced separation between humans and Lumarians. The responses came slowly at first, then with increasing frequency, a growing coalition of the curious and the hopeful, seeing in Nyara's child the possibility of healing an ancient wound. Meanwhile, on Lumaria, Emperor Thaxton faced unexpected resistance. When he ordered the Imperial fleet to prepare for a special operation to Sanctuary Moon, half of his admirals requested formal clarification of the mission parameters, an unprecedented challenge to Imperial authority. Rumors had spread through the highest levels of Lumarian society. The Hearthstone's color change couldn't be hidden, and its significance was known to those versed in ancient lore. Some began to whisper that perhaps the Emperor's obsession with genetic purity was itself a deviation from the true path of their species. The chief geneticist, risking everything, approached Thaxton in his war chamber. Majesty, I must show you something. He projected a holographic display of ancient genetic sequences. These are from pre-Severance archives. The original plan included a reunification phase, meant to occur after both genetic branches had stabilized. According to the calculations of our ancestors, that time is now. Thaxton stared at the projection, his rage momentarily tempered by scientific curiosity. What are you suggesting? That your grandchild may not be an aberration, but the fulfillment of a plan set in motion 15,000 years ago, the geneticist said carefully. The child's unique genetic structure could stabilize the psychic network in ways we never imagined, strengthening rather than weakening our civilization. The emperor's face remained impassive, but doubt had been planted. For the first time, he considered the possibility that his reaction had been wrong, that his daughter's child might represent not the end of Lumarian greatness, but its evolution. On Sanctuary Moon, as the coalition of allies grew and preparations were made for whatever came next, Niara and Reed found a moment of quiet beneath the star-filled sky. If the child is born, Niara said softly, what becomes of us? Reed took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. I don't know, I'm a diplomat, not a prophet, but I do know that nothing will be the same for either of our peoples. I'm scared, she admitted, the royal mask finally falling away completely. Not just of my father, but of what this means. Our child will carry the hopes and fears of two civilizations. Then we'll just have to make sure they also carry our love, Reed replied simply. That seems like a good place to start. Above them, the stars shifted in patterns unseen for 15 millennia, as if the cosmos itself was realigning to accommodate what was about to be born. Not just a child, but a new understanding between long-separated children of a common ancestry. As days passed, the coalition that Lyria and Reed had begun to assemble transformed from a loose network of sympathizers into an organized movement. Representatives from scientific communities across both human and Lumarian space sent encrypted messages of support. Several members of the Lumarian royal court, distant cousins who had long chafed under Thaxon's rigid rule, pledged their resources and influence. Most surprisingly, a delegation of human Lumarian hybrid children arrived at Sanctuary Moon. They were few in number, no more than 24, each the product of rare, secret unions that had somehow overcome the genetic barriers between the species. They had lived their lives in hiding, neither fully accepted by human or Lumarian society. Now they stood before Niara with a mixture of hope and trepidation, seeing in her child the possibility of a world where they would no longer need to hide. We heard the call, said their leader, a woman named Celine, whose violet eyes marked her Lumarian heritage, while her bronze skin spoke of human ancestry. Not in words, but in dreams. Your child reached out to us across the stars. Niara, her pregnancy now showing visibly as a golden glow beneath her skin, embraced Celine with tears in her eyes. I didn't know there were others. My father, the emperor, always insisted such unions were impossible. Not impossible, Celine replied with a wry smile. Just improbable, and fiercely suppressed whenever they occurred. But now things are changing. The Hearthstone's transformation has become known throughout Lumarian space. It speaks of ancient prophecies fulfilled. Meanwhile, Emperor Thaxon's planned assault on Sanctuary Moon faltered before it could begin. Key military commanders delayed deployment orders, citing technical issues or requesting additional intelligence. The imperial geneticist, emboldened by the emperor's moment of doubt, had quietly circulated the pre-severance archives among trusted colleagues in the scientific community. A subtle resistance formed, not open rebellion, but a web of strategic hesitation that effectively paralyzed the emperor's war machine. Frustrated and increasingly isolated, Thaxon made a fateful decision. If his own forces would not move against this threat to the bloodline, he would go himself. Taking his personal vessel, a sleek, crystalline craft infused with his own psychic signature, he departed Lumaria in secret, accompanied only by his most loyal guards. The journey to Sanctuary Moon would take several days, even at maximum speed. During that time, the ancient consciousness that had stirred at the edges of known space grew stronger. It observed the unfolding drama with what might be described as anticipation. Had such a concept applied to a being that existed beyond conventional time and space? This entity, older than the Severance, older perhaps than the civilizations it watched, had been waiting for precisely this moment. The reunion of the divided genetic lines was not just a biological event, but a cosmic milestone, the fulfillment of a design set in motion eons ago. As Thaxon's ship cut through hyperspace towards Sanctuary Moon, the ancient consciousness reached out, not to stop him, but to ensure his arrival. The Emperor was necessary for what would come next. the final piece in a pattern that had been incomplete for 15,000 years. On Sanctuary Moon, preparations for the birth intensified. The Heartgrove had become a hub of activity, with Lyria directing a team of hybrid healers in creating a birthing chamber that would safely channel the immense energies the child was likely to release. Reed, fully recovered from his injuries, worked tirelessly to coordinate the growing coalition and establish defensive perimeters around the grove. Niara felt the child's consciousness growing clearer each day. Sometimes it communicated in dreams, showing her visions of the unified species they had once been, a civilization of extraordinary abilities and cosmic understanding. Other times it shared memories that were not her own, Reed's childhood on Earth, Emperor Thaxon's private moments of doubt and fear, the lives of the hybrid children who had lived in secrecy for generations. "The child is connecting us," she explained to Reed one evening as they sat beneath the bioluminescent canopy. "Not just you and me, but everyone. Humans, Lumarians, hybrids. It's creating a new kind of psychic network, one that transcends the artificial divisions of the severance." Reed placed his hand over hers, feeling the warmth of the life growing within her. "Is that what the original scientists intended? A psychic reunification of the species?" "I think they knew it would happen eventually," Niara replied, "but they couldn't predict the form it would take. This child, our child, is something beyond their calculations. It's not just carrying genetic memory, it's actively reshaping the future." Their quiet conversation was interrupted by an urgent signal from the perimeter sensors. A single vessel had entered the sanctuary system, moving directly toward the moon with purpose and speed. "It's my father," Niara said, her voice suddenly tight. "I can feel his presence, his anger, his fear, his confusion." Reed's expression hardened. "I'll alert the defense teams. We need to—" "No," Niara interrupted, placing a hand on his arm. "The child is showing me something. My father must come. His presence is necessary for what happens next." "Necessary for what?" Reed asked, concerned. "Niara, he's coming to destroy the child, to destroy everything we've built here." She shook her head, a serene smile spreading across her face. "He thinks that's why he's coming. But the truth is more complex. The Hearthstone didn't just recognize our child. It recognized a pattern set in motion before the severance. My father is part of that pattern, whether he understands it or not." Reed didn't look convinced, but he trusted Niara's connection to the child. "What do we do?" "We welcome him," she said simply, "and we trust that what needs to happen will happen." Far from the tranquility of Sanctuary Moon, in the shadows between worlds, the ancient collective consciousness continued its patient observation. Soon, very soon, the circle would close, not with war or destruction, but with a recognition that transcended both. The divided children of its legacy were ready, at last, to remember what they had been and to glimpse what they might become. "It begins," whispered a voice that had not been heard since before the severance. "The circle closes at last." The reconciliation of worlds had commenced, and nothing in the galaxy would remain unchanged.